Rise and Elevate is dedicated to sharing the message of failures and successes, but those failures don't have to be negatives. They can be additives. They can be the lessons that we learn that help us to grow and become more. All right. Good morning, everybody. Tom Fox here with Devin Pinches, and this is our first podcast of 2026 for Rise and Elevate. Here we like to look at some of the guests' successes and failures along their way. And this guest is a very special guest that I've known for many years. We met back in the very early part of 2000 and have been friends ever since across the country through families, divorces, friends, and all sorts of travel. I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Devin Pinches, for his intro.
Thank you, Tom. So our guest today is Dean, and Dean is the CFO and co-founder of Lifetime Tea. They are a USDA certified organic private label tea manufacturer built from the ground up. With decades of experience as a Fortune 100 sales executive, entrepreneur, and internationally recognized tea expert, Dean has helped scale thousands of businesses through disciplined growth, financial rigor, and operational focus. What began at a kitchen table has now grown into a national production facility serving brands, hotels, and resorts across the U.S. Dean, welcome to Rise and Elevate.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year to you too, Dean. It's awesome that you're a part of our podcast. You know, part of our focus is that a rising tide lifts all ships. And what our message is, we want to share with our viewers a message of positivity and hope. And we talk about your successes and failures, and not so much those actual occurrences, but what we've learned from that. And one of the things that you've shared with me through the years and what you've done is how at times you've spread yourself thin. And then when you learn to focus on the thing that you wanted to grow, it happened. Talk to me about how you've learned from focus and not spreading yourself so thin.
Yeah, well said. Thank you, by the way, for having me on. I've had a chance to watch some of the other episodes that have been just wonderful, and I think the messaging that you guys have been doing with this podcast has been wonderful. So I'm very happy and grateful to be a part of this and for our friendship, Tom, and to have made your acquaintance, Devin. If there is one thing that I could say that I am really good at, it's been my failures, and it's sometimes hard to say, but it's something that I think through life, taking chances and exposing oneself to risk has been at times very rewarding and at other times very detrimental in many ways. So I think, the old cliche is you try and learn from those mistakes and avoid making the same mistakes over and over again. And, as I look back, it's easy to do things in hindsight. I'm able to see some of the same mistakes that were made over and over. And, I look back and think, why the heck didn't I learn from some of these mistakes when I made them? And then I made them again. Right. So, of course, I think you reach certain points in life, or at least I have, that I said, enough is enough. I in my mind's eye, see myself being a better person, both from a disciplinary perspective, financial perspective, and from on a humanitarian level, just to try and be a better person all the way around, to just not make some of those same mistakes over and over again. And by making small changes, I've been fortunate to have seen some pretty transformational results from that.
But Dean, you were able to look back at some of those things and learn from them. That's something that so few people do. Right? If it was painful, if it was hurtful, we try to push it away. We try to suppress it. And where we really, when we dig in and dig deep, where we learn and the greatest growth happens on the other side of suck, right? We have to go through something that's terrible to come out and learn something from it. Now, like you said, if you make the mistake over and over again, we're not looking back and learning. But that's a powerful statement, is to be able to finally decide that I'm not going to do that same thing again. I'm going to learn something from it. Maybe it's just a little tweak. Maybe it's just something that you do a little different. But I love that. That's part of the fun of the growth and quite frankly, failing, because then we go to that next level.
It is, absolutely. And, as we all look back at points in our life, no matter our age, certain things at certain times mean more to us than they do today.
Right.
There's a time in a younger person's life where getting that first car, whatever it happens to be, is everything in the world to them. And they're willing to either stretch themselves to buy it or search high and wide to buy it. And then once they get it, it's like, now what do I do? And whether they're fixing it up or just maintaining the payments or second guessing whether or not this was the right choice, once they get in it every day and say, well, it's a great car, but I don't fit in it, or it doesn't ride as well as I thought. And sometimes you realize when you go to sell that car that it's worth much, much less than what you bought it for, and think, gosh, how was I so foolish to have paid so much for something that's worth so little to others? How did I not see that? And again, I think that's part of hindsight and being able to look back at certain things. And as I've gotten older, certain things that mattered to me 20 or 30 years ago matter much less because other things matter more.
Right.
And it's a personal choice. It's all a matter of perspective. Some of the things that I try to focus on in my life revolve around our business, because it's a big part of what we do. It's part of why I'm able to enjoy coming to work every day, but also because of the people that come to work for us every day and the work that they put in to help us get there. It's grown beyond just my wife and I. It's grown into something that has its own life. Many other customers that we have depend upon us for their livelihood. So there's been a sort of a paradigm shift of how things are managed in a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. And we're always trying to grow. We're always trying to improve and make things better by, of course, not making the same mistakes over. But we're also trying to make those little changes and those small adjustments that will sometimes have very profound effects down the road. And I think a lot of that comes from learned experience.
Sure.
So I'd like to start from the very beginning. Dean, we're talking about tea. That is such a niche market to enter. What is the story there? How did you guys do it? Why tea?
We got in it purely by accident. To give you the Cliff's Notes version of how we got in it, we had sold a few rental properties that we had back in New Jersey at the time. And after driving around looking at some commercial properties where we decided we wanted to get into, is just a shift in where we were looking to invest, we went into this English style tea house after looking at some houses just to look over the notes. And we sat down in the place at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock on a Tuesday. It was packed. It was cold and damp, and there were women at every table having a great time. And there was a Red Hatters meeting going on where a group of ladies with their big red hats were sitting there having tea time. And the owners were from London, and they had this very thick British accent, and their staff had a very thick British accent. So it was really as authentic a tea house as could be. And I was just captivated by the whole experience. In talking with our realtor, going over the numbers and the properties that we looked at, he also mentioned, he said, by the way, this place is for sale. I thought, what do you mean this place? The whole house, the building. It was in a historic house on a main street in the town that we lived in. And the owners were very motivated to move back to the UK. So one thing led to another. We got into discussions. The more they kept talking, the lower the price kept going. And it just, we wound up making a purchase of that property without knowing much about the restaurant business or the tea business. And we made a go of it.
That was the Mulberry Tea House, right?
Mulberry Tea House, yes, on Main Street in Medford. And, over time, things work out. Sometimes things don't work out. We take chances. You work with vendors and suppliers. But the one thing that we noticed about that business was that they had 30 or 40 different teas up on their shelves, and they were all different companies' teas. There was nothing that said Mulberry Tea House. So when you would leave this really cool place, you had nothing to really remind you of the experience other than the experience itself. So when we got it, the first thing we did was we started inquiring with other companies about how do we private label our own teas, so that when a customer walks in, they look at this wall of teas and all they see are Mulberry Tea House teas that are, branded in our own private label. And what we found was that most of the companies that were offering this service had very high minimums, and it was cost prohibitive for us at that time to think about launching 10, much less 30 or more different teas with our brand on it. So we looked at that as an opportunity to say, we cannot be the only ones looking for this opportunity. There must be people out there that want to get into the tea business for any number of reasons, and they just don't know where to go. So we got a separate license through the township to be able to package and co-package teas. We printed labels at Staples and for Office Max, and put them on pouches that we purchased. And we started private labeling the teas right there in our facility. And lo and behold, some of those teas started selling by customers that were coming in to have lunch. They wanted that as a keepsake. We then launched a website and started selling the teas on the website. And we saw that we were onto something there. And over time, we went through some economic cycles, some health issues, and some other challenges in the course of time that forced us out of that business. But when we relocated out to Arizona in 2013, my wife and I we launched Lifetime Tea for the sole purpose of acting as a private label resource to helping others get into the business, of tea. And what we found was that there was an overwhelming demand for the service that we had. We just did not know how to set pricing correctly. We didn't know what you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
Certain things. So we were kind of learning this on the fly and figuring out best practices as we were starting. And of course, we made some mistakes, but we had some really good successes along the way. And over that time, as we start to fast forward it, we trimmed down some of our product offerings. We focused in on some of the trends and the products that were really most profitable. So by doing that, we then started focusing in using some of the analytics and the data that's available through SEO campaigns and other search data that's available to use to bring people looking for specific purposes to the site. By refining those searches, we were really able to target in on customers looking for very specific products. And what we found was that most of the people looking to get into the tea business, many of them were women. And they were getting into it for personal reasons, either because they wanted a tea that would help them with some of the physical ailments they may have been dealing with, or they've had a family member or a friend that was dealing with something that tea may have helped them out with. It could have been someone as simple as, for example, that may have had a parent or a grandparent that was dealing with severe arthritis that wound up drinking a ginger turmeric tea, and their inflammation started going down. And they were able to attribute it to the tea because it didn't start happening until after they started drinking the tea. Now, they wouldn't stop taking their medication and just go to the tea, but the tea was a support with their medication. In the same way that there are certain teas that have been able to help reduce cholesterol and alleviate headaches and weight loss and sleep and energy and a whole variety of different issues. Teas have been a big part of humanity for thousands and thousands of years.
And Dean, now you've taken this business that happened. And by the way, Devin, I have to tell you that as part of the marketing campaign that Dean was talking about, he sponsored a men's over 30 softball team called the Teabaggers. That was my team. Dean and I had an amazing time and lots of fun stories about, sharing this. There were a lot of people that talked about tea and what it meant. And here we are, these guys playing softball, and we were the Teabaggers. And it was fantastic fun. But Dean, you took something that was initially an investment in real estate, You turned it into something that was a restaurant style business. And then you made it into this huge tea manufacturing private label enterprise. And now, Dean, you're speaking internationally about tea to people all over the globe. And what I'd love to hear about is how it felt the first time you got up and were able to talk to a huge group at this tea symposium. I don't know where it was in Europe. I remember you telling me about it. Where was the first one that you did, Dean?
It's the World Tea Expo. So the World Tea Expo has a variety of different locations, usually around the U.S. They had it in Copenhagen, Denmark, but the one
Copenhagen, I think that's the first one that I remember you telling me about.
Amazing country too. They're big tea drinkers and just wonderful people there. But it's been really a great industry to be a part of because, again, to your point earlier, Tom, about rising tide, when you start doing things that help others. I think it was Zig Ziglar that said you can get anything you want out of life if you just help enough other people get what they want.
Yeah.
And by adopting something simple like that into our everyday, you get to see that it really holds true, that you start creating products for people that help them improve the quality of their life. And of course, they're going to stick with something, particularly women. I keep going back to that because women to us have been they're a much smarter consumer group, let's put it that way, to work with. They generally know what they want. They don't mind spending a little more for it if it's of high quality. They're very loyal to a product if it works. And they'll be the first to tell you if it doesn't work, and they'll tell their friends if it doesn't work. In the same way, they'll tell their friends if it does work. So by understanding those consumer and buying habits of the female business person, aspiring business person, we've been able to really cultivate some great relationships with customers, mostly women, but some men, of course, as well, that have started businesses that have had a mission of helping people. So functional teas have been a big part of what has been the success driver for our business and what was a big turning point for us. We can make the case that, the World Tea Expo is a great stage to be able to share experiences and help educate other aspiring tea entrepreneurs to learn best practices and figure out what mistakes not to make based on our conversations. But the teas that have been most successful for us, the biz tea entrepreneurs that have been most successful, are those that are getting into selling specialty products like a menopause tea. Women of a certain age, they're in their mid-40s to mid-50s, start with a perimenopause, they go into menopause, and then they have a post-menopause cycle where during this time for many women, there's a lot of discomfort, whether it's night sweats or hot flashes, mood swings, irritability, and just a variety of other issues that teas and herbs specifically have been able to alleviate these symptoms in a way that's improved their quality of life. And, again, I think if someone can drink a tea and not take a pill and feel better and get a better night's sleep as a result of it and feel less sluggish in the morning and feel better around the people that they love and overall improve their quality of life, that's a product they're going to pay a premium for because you're not going to find it off the store shelf. And they're going to stick with that brand and tell their friends. So we've had some really interesting, fun success stories in that type of space that's evolved into other areas. You start inquiring about women that are going through menopause, let's say, what are some of the challenges that they're dealing with in addition to the symptoms of menopause. Many of them find that because their metabolisms have been slowing down, or maybe through dietary changes over the years, they've put on a few extra pounds that they would like to lose. And so finding ways to help incorporate a weight loss element to a menopause tea has been extremely helpful for us in helping other customers to not only accomplish reducing their symptoms, but helping with their weight loss goals.
So, Dean, don't you think that there's also a cultural aspect? I know, Devin, you could probably talk, in depth about this, right? But I think there's a concept when you look at tea, right? There's a little bit of the preparation that goes into it. Seeping the tea, right? You're warming the water. You're putting the tea bag in. You're sitting. You're taking some time. You're having a moment, right? The concept of being able to be present, to just have your tea and share that. Now, certainly, if there's a health benefit, if there's something focused for that tea. But I think there's a cultural thing that goes along with that when you can slow down and be present and appreciate the moment, I think that goes a long way, right? The belief in your business, the belief in what you're taking in, trusting that it's going to be health conscious for you. But I think there's something that influences the mindset, that taking the moment to be present and doing that with the whole tea culture is important too.
Absolutely. My wife is Japanese, and the Japanese culture is so special in so many ways, and so different in so many ways than how things are here in the West. There's a term in Japan, it's called Ichigo Ichi-e. I can't tell you the exact spelling, but I'm sure if you just phonetically typed it in and looked it up, but it's to exactly your point, Tom. It's everything in this moment. And to the Japanese, they look at life in almost little frames of moments. So steeping the tea, that moment of standing by the stove as the tea kettle is getting hot and hearing the whistle come out of the tea kettle, knowing that it's in anticipation of hot water that's going to be poured over leaves that will infuse and provide a beautiful tasting cup that will create a feeling of whatever it is that tea is supposed to do for you at that time in your life. And
right.
Knowing that much like this encounter right now, it will never happen again in this way. Right. We may chat again on this platform, but it will never be quite like this because this is this moment. So yeah, I think that's something really special. And I think to kind of dovetail from that to another interesting concept that the Japanese have, it's a term called ikigai. Are you familiar with that? Have you?
No.
Ikigai, I believe it's about Ikigai, but there's 4 components to Ikigai that are some of the reasons that the Japanese are some of the oldest living people on Earth, specifically Okinawans. In Okinawa, Japan, they are not the wealthiest of people. They're not even the healthiest of people because many people over there still smoke cigarettes. So, but they are among the happiest of people. And to find your Ikigai, it's really finding your purpose. You have to break it into 4 components, and it's really part of a Venn diagram that has overlapping elements to it. But with Ikigai, you have to find something that you love to do, something that you're good at, something that the world needs, and something that you can make money in. And if you could find all 4 of those into one thing, which is not easy to do, as Tom, you and I know from working at our job, we were fortunate to have maybe been on the good side of some financial years where we earned a pretty decent living, relatively speaking. But there were some stresses and challenges that came with sitting at a desk all day, tethered to a phone, listening, waiting for it to ring over and over and over. And we look at other people that may have not had as big of a paycheck, perhaps, but they've had a better quality of life or better balance or work-life balance. And I think to find your Ikigai, it's something that most people should try and do to just based on the statistics, to live a better quality, more balanced life. It's not always.
Dean, I think that goes into purpose, right? Finding a purpose, right? Sometimes it's a mission. You know, we had one of our previous guests was the CEO of Freedom Service Dogs of America, right? And they help train dogs that are for those that go through post-traumatic stress syndrome or some stressors, whether they're a veteran or a first responder, and they need that emotional support, right? Finding that purpose or finding that reason to continue to do more. And if you can help people, if you can also earn a living, you can help provide for your family, that gives you that satisfaction, right? I think in Scandinavia, they have a term, it's called hygge, Hygee. And it's about finding that happy place, right? Not always looking for something else that's going to make us happy, but trying to be happy with what we have, right? And, you know, each week we have, you know, a quote when we do our podcast. And I want to inject that because I think now's a good time for that. And it comes from a great basketball mind, Coach John Wooden. And he said, the things work out best for those who make the best of how things work out. right?
I have it here on my desk. I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, that's a quote that I have referred to all the time. I mean, it's just
because we can't always change what happens to us, Dean. But the one thing that we can change if we choose to is how we respond or react to the things we go through. Right. And I know that you've had some, shifting away from tea for just a moment. I know you've had some challenges, right? You and I both share the fact that we went through a divorce and we have children. You have a son, Xander. How old's he now? He's got to be in his upper 20s.
He'll be 26. Yeah.
26. And my twins are 24, Tommy and Alyssa. And, certainly when you go through those things, those emotions of divorce, the separation, the change in life, right? I mean, moving from New Jersey to Arizona, going through this and finding Lumi and finding the Lifetime Tea business, certainly those are things that can be a challenge, right? But you have taken all of that and continued to step forward. And I think you should be proud of what you accomplished, not only for your family, but for Lifetime Tea and all of the things that you've done. I value our friendship a lot. And I really appreciate how the way that you look at things, right? Because I too have that glass, and even if it's almost empty, it's still half full, right? For me, I want to take something good out of everything. And I think that's important. And I love the way you frame those things, because I think that's ultimately up to us how we process those things.
Absolutely. And yes, I value our friendship too, Tom. It's just been wonderful. Everyone, Devin and I were chatting before you came on. And
we were.
Everyone should have a friend like Tom Fox in their life. And anyone who knows you, I'm sure, is probably shaking their head saying, yeah, he's right. He's right. So, yeah, I think that life comes at you hard. And divorce is a very difficult, raw situation. I don't know that time has a way of healing things up from it. Especially when there are children involved, it becomes difficult, and it's a tough situation, and it's something that my parents are married for 58 years, so the idea of divorce was never something that entered into my life, and I don't think it's something anyone who's ever been divorced thinks about when they get married. It's just not. So it's again part of how life kind of rolls at you, and how you handle it and deal with it, and then how you try and continue to make yourself better and just be a better person and a better steward to the environment and to the economy and to others and to helping things, and just trying to not make the same mistakes over and over. And that's kind of where I'm at right now in life. I feel like I'm humbled at the idea that people come into our place of business every day to work. I mean, to me, there's no greater phone call that I could ever get than from a lender doing a verification of employment for one of our employees. Like, as someone who spent years in the lending business, I know how that works. And I mean, those are great calls when they come in, or when I see somebody pull up in a newer car. It doesn't have to be brand new, but a newer car. It tells me that person is comfortable in doing what they do, and they are able to make small milestones happen in their life. And even if it's something as simple as getting a new car for them, and that's a good thing. And it makes me feel good to know that we're able to kind of help rise the tide for everyone around us, as a sort of a dovetail. And, I think about an interesting quote from Mike Tyson. Love him or hate him, the guy is he's amazing.
He was a beast.
He's the beast. But one of the things he said about discipline and trying to stay focused is, and I have this in our production room, I have it on our machinery that our people who work in the back do grinding and blending, is discipline, doing what you hate, but do it like you love it. And I think there are a lot of people that go into work or do the things that they may not necessarily love to do, but they have to put on a brave face, and they have to just put your head down and head down and through. There's a German term, I can't think of what it is offhand, but it's head down and through is really what it is. You just put your head down and go right in it and not look back and just...
Well, I think, Dean, if more people just do their best, right? Like, not worrying about what other people think, not comparing ourselves to anyone else, do the best with the tools that you have, the time that you have, where you're here. I think there's so much value in that, right? And as part of the passion project that I do is the race car with my dad. And we've been fortunate enough to have some really good success through the years. And every time I put a kid in the car, and I always say to them, I'm like, look, if you want to sit in my race car, you have to promise me one thing. And generally it's in front of their parents, and the parents are looking, they're like, oh my God, what's he going to say? And I said, look, you just have to do your very best in school, not compared to your classmates or your brothers and sisters, but your very best. And kids love that. And they're like, oh, of course, yes. And they sit in there and we let them drive steer the race car and pull on the brake. And, that moment, although it's only a moment for me, might have an impact to them and might help them to get past something because you just do your best, right? And it's we don't always know where our life is going to take us. We don't always get to control that. Some terrible things happen to people, right? But how do we respond? And that's something that you should be proud of, Dean. I'm excited to not only have you as my friend, but be on this podcast with us, with Devin and I. And we appreciate your time.
My pleasure. I'm humbled and really grateful for our friendship as well, and to have made your acquaintance, Devin. It's been a really wonderful experience, and I wish you guys continued success with this. This is great. The messaging that you're putting out there is something that I think resonates with most people who are looking to improve themselves in however they can. So have a wonderful 2026. I know we'll be in touch, and hope we get a chance to connect and hug it out somewhere along the way, because Tom usually makes some random trips into Arizona when he does. That's always fun too. So thank you again. And it's a great time today.
Thanks for listening to Rise and Elevate, the podcast where we talk mindset, moves, and motivation to level up your life and business. Keep rising, keep elevating.